Okay, good afternoon. We will reconvene today's meeting at 1 o'clock. There is no report from closed session, so the next item for consideration is the minutes of the regular meeting from March 2nd. Mover and seconder for those minutes. If no questions, moved for approved as presented, moved by Councilor Natchez, second by Councilor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. First report, 9.1, Finance, Statement of Council and Committee Member Remuneration and Expenses Report. Ms. Pope.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, I have before you the 2025 Statement of Council and Committee Member Remuneration Expenses Report. As a reminder, all per diems are reported on the T4 and are taxable, whereas all other expenses are non-taxable and indicated herein.
Questions with regards to the report before us? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Kimberly, is there a potential or possibility so that, especially this year being election year coming up, that all the remunerations from the county for both the mayor and the deputy mayor could be itemized so that anybody in the process or thinking about getting in the process would have a better idea of what the remunerations might add up to in total?
Ms. Pope.
Thank you. I did reach out to the county deputy treasurer, and the report is going before their council on Wednesday. And the information is available to us that I could circulate to you. If council desires me to bring back the report and provide it later, I could do that as well.
Other questions? Seeing none. So the motion in the report is that council receive the 2025 Statement of Council and Committee Member Remuneration and Expense Report. Moved by Councilor Edgerton, seconded by Councilor Natchez. All in favor? That is approved. 9.2, Planning 2026-06, intention to repeal and replace sections of the Village of Millbrook bylaw number 8531, designated properties under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Ms. Ellis.
To you, Mayor Graham, members of council, report building and planning 2026-06 is before you today with the recommendation that council approve bylaw numbers 2026-11, -12, and -13 being bylaws to repeal and replace sections of the Village of Millbrook bylaw number 8531, designating 8 King Street West, 11 King Street West, and 13 Ann Street in the township of Cavan-Monaghan as being of cultural heritage value or interest under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. These bylaws have been reviewed by the Municipal Revitalization Heritage Advisory Committee. They've been circulated in accordance with the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act. We did hear back from one property owner with a little bit of a concern, but we had some discussion by email, and I believe we have resolved those concerns. And I've pointed out that the properties are already designated and have been so since 1985. And the purpose of these bylaws is to merely identify which specific characteristics of these buildings are worthy of protection. So I think that clarified things, and also advise everyone, so everyone is aware that the Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee members are here to assist with inquiries and research as required.
Thanks, Ms. Ellison. Just so we're clear, because I did speak to one of the resident owners that with regards to their, and just for clarity. So when you were talking about them being recognized or already designated as a heritage facility, it's not as though it's entirely constraining. It's more pertaining to the historical or cultural, or I guess historically significant elements of the design or construction of those homes. It's not a complete sort of moratorium on every nuanced piece of, you know, whether it's glass or things like they might want to do from a renovation standpoint. Can you maybe provide me a little clarity just so I can better answer that question in the future with how the designation versus further, you know, pursuits apply to these different properties and the implications therein? I'm sure, knowing that all are different. Sorry.
To you, Mayor Graham and members of council. So with the designated property, so the entire property is designated. And if you look at the 1985 bylaw, it's very generic in terms of what the protection is to the property. So with the process that we're going through now, we are identifying those specific characteristics of the building or buildings on the property that are worthy of protection. So there is an outline in the bylaw specifically of the attributes that we are trying to protect. Having said that, so if somebody wants to change one of those attributes, remove it, change it, add to it, whatever, It doesn't mean that they can't do that. What it means is they have to have a plan. They bring the plan to the Municipal Revitalization Heritage Advisory Committee for review. That committee looks at it, accepts it, makes suggestions, rejects it. However it goes, there's back and forth. We also provide expertise. We have some qualified individuals on that committee who are exceptionally well-trained and have the skills to provide information and recommendations to people. So once it goes through the Heritage Advisory Committee and the proposal is acceptable, that recommendation comes to council for final approval. So all we ask is that people put a plan on paper, come to the committee for review, and we are here to assist even to develop the plan. So we can help them identify, yes, that might be possible, or you're not really going down the greatest path. Why don't you think about this instead? So it really is an advisory situation, but council does have final approval on what may or may not be permitted on a designated property.
And so when we're going through the process of, because I know there's been legislative changes that make a lot of the heritage bylaws sort of out of step or with the updated legislation, but so what part of the process when we're going through and refining and updating these heritage bylaws is sort of refining those protections on specific properties for those nuanced elements that require or warrant that protection. It doesn't mean there's still not a process by which you have to go through consideration for renovations or projects of this, of any kind. Is that a fair summation?
To you, Mayor Graham and members of council. Yes, so the process is still there. So the properties that we are dealing with are already designated. They already have to go through that process. The point of these bylaws is to specifically identify those key features that we want to protect.
Questions, members of council? Seeing none, the recommendation is a report that council approved bylaw number 2026-11, bylaw number 26-12, and bylaw number 26-13 being bylaws to repeal and replace sections of the Village of Millbrook bylaw number 85-35 designating 8 King Street West, 11 King Street West, and 13 Ann Street in the township of Cabmonaghan, formerly the Village of Millbrook, as being of cultural heritage value or interest under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Next is Ms. Page, the Corporate Service Procedural Bylaw Update.
Thank you, Mayor Graham, to yourself and the rest of council. Before you is Corporate Services Report 2026-05, the procedural bylaw update. As council will see, this bylaw is required under the Municipal Act to govern the calling, the place, and the proceedings of the meetings. Staff can go through each of the highlights if you would like, or I'm here to answer questions, whichever is easiest.
We'll try the questions first and go from there. But thank you for the report and thank you for that summary. I thought it was helpful to just sort of summarize all of the changes because there's a lot of nuanced language that's required under the act. Deputy Mayor, question.
Through you, Chair, to Ms. Page, just a clarification on the video recording, because I know we've had a few instances where our the internet connectivity is down to the office. We've had to suspend council anytime. So this is kind of fixing that problem where we can record the session and then post it after the fact, rather than if we're not live, then we're dead in the water. Is that correct? Thank you.
Councilor Brink.
Through the chair to that point, if there's somebody coming to us online, does that change the dynamics of that again?
To Mayor Graham, to Councillor Burns. So if there was somebody that was coordinated, which I can't think of a scenario unless it was a consultant coming in, because for our public meetings, we don't allow virtual participation. You need to be in the chambers. So any of those situations, we would accommodate that, or we would request if the person had to participate virtually, that they would not be able to participate in. We would just make that amendment through council. Just to piggyback on Deputy Mayor's point. So there is no legislative requirement to live stream or record. So we didn't want to leave this in here to prohibit us from moving forward with the advancement of the business, which is legislatively, we can do just by the minutes. We don't actually need the live recording. So for those situations, if they ever occurred, we would just deal with them as one-offs.
No, and I think it's good to have, I think the recordings are very important because I mean, I've gone back to them for many cases and the minutes are really just summations of the, like, it doesn't capture the conversation or comments or discussion really to the fullest extent because I mean, they're minutes, that's what they do. But I think the recordings are great, so everything we can do. But I think to Councilor Burns' point, but I think you kind of address this a little bit, is that like, there's obviously no way to, they can't view it if it's not being streamed live. So, but they can as soon as it gets posted or uploaded to YouTube to be able to be viewed at that point. So there's no real way around that, but that's the intention. Got it. Okay. Other questions, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair to the clerk, I was hoping this was the right format to discuss and maybe talk about the wording and the content of this particular bylaw. One thing that I struggle with because of my limitations is one of the 23 notice of motion. And I'm just wondering if there's a chance to maybe reword that somewhat differently, so somebody of my abilities, I misinterpreted the concept, that it would make it more clear that the written documentation for any notice of motion needs to be presented to staff without any discussion at the meeting.
Ms. Page?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Burns. So I'm assuming you're talking about 23A. So that, do you have a recommendation on what you would like the language to look like to make it clearer? As it stands right now, as long as that item is not already being discussed on the agenda, at the conclusion of that meeting, you would give that to the clerk, and then we would add it at the subsequent meeting coming up. That would be read aloud. And then at that point, you would not, then you would move on to 3. If you were here, if the person was not here, and then the motion would be discussed. Do you have a recommendation on how you think we could clear that language up?
Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, I do not. All I was thinking was if there was something there that made me aware easily that it's needed to be prior to any mention of it at all, that 2-week window or possibly more would be required.
Just for clarification, through your, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne. So right now, if the item is already identified on the agenda, you can talk about it. You don't need to bring a notice of motion forward. This would only come into play if the item was not something that was to be discussed. So in that situation, if there was something that was to be discussed and you had a motion, you were struggling with how you would need to add that or what report to add that on, as we've always discussed, staff are here to help you. Come to the CAO, come to myself. We can procedurally help guide you through that. But this is for situations where the item is not being discussed and it's a new item of business. So, okay.
Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair, I guess, to Ms. Councilor Burns' point, I mean, the last sentence of it, you know, the motion should be, should be, you know, verified to the, or, sorry, let me try, submitted to the clerk at the conclusion of a meeting. That sounds very restrictive. Like it doesn't sound like between meetings, the clerk can be provided with the notice of motion to put on the agenda. I mean, I don't understand the conclusion of a meeting context in this case.
Through Mayor Graham to Deputy Mayor Huntley, the intent of that is to make sure we have it in time to add it to the upcoming agenda. So if you already know at the conclusion of this meeting that at the subsequent meeting, the meeting coming up, that you want to add that, you would just give it to me at the end of that meeting, and then I would just add it to the agenda, such as we've done for this meeting. You will see that. So at the end of our last meeting, Councillor Byrne provided the notice of motion to me. We've added it. So now it can be put on a public agenda and it can be considered. So if I could see your eyes percolating, so if there's some language that council thinks that we can clarify this, please provide that to us, and staff's happy to make that adjustment.
Well, I've been thinking about that. And what about, like, to me, I kind of agree with both points. Like, I don't think the conclusion of the meeting is kind of merits the exact time where it's supposed to happen. But would it be an obstacle to simply at the conclusion of the meeting or prior to the posting of the next agenda? Like, to me, that's kind of how everything else works. So, you know, if it's consistent in that, like, at least now we identify, it makes sense to include the end of the meeting to the deadline for the next, like, then it's giving you a range to work within rather than just then at that one time. And what if you forget and you leave, or you get a call and you got to rush away from a meeting? I think if there's no obstructions to that sort of creating that range, I think that would make a little bit more plausible sense, if that's okay. If maybe you can tell me why that's a bad idea.
Through Mayor Graham to yourself, it is not a bad idea. I think it would just have to be in time prior to postings. That would be 5 business days prior to posting, like we do for the delegates by noon. That would be the only request, but we can easily make that amendment.
I think that gives us a window instead of a specific time, which I think makes a lot more sense. So I think if that's amenable, then we could make that motion to make that, just add that verbiage to the end of that sentence, and then we can still make progress. And as you said, like, there's always staff are available to work through any changes. But I do think, to Deputy Mayor's point, we should identify the space and time rather than just one specific opportunity. Okay. So do you want me to create language around that amendment, or for the motion to, how would you like that to be facilitated in a way that is to your liking and to the process?
Through Mayor Graham to yourself, just can we stop? Counselor Byrne, will that clarify if we use that we add prior to 5 business days prior to posting of the next agenda, if we added that under 23A?
Through the chair, I think that would help.
Perfect. That is what we're here to do. So if council allows, I think the best recommendation would be that you allow me to amend this and I will bring it back to our following meeting and it will just be added under bylaws under the bottom and it will be clean. It'll be the same number, but it will be a clean version of it. That's what staff is recommending.
I mean, it, I just work, like, does it have to come back? I mean, it's literally the one sentence that we're adding. If we can give direction for staff just to make that adjustment and approve the bylaw, I don't think there's any, I don't hear any objections. I'd like, rather than just, I think the procedural bylaw is an important document. You've made some improvements here and let's just, get a bit more semblance of order on that section. I think it makes sense. So I will need your help on a motion to accomplish that though, just so we're clear. So just take it. So with regards to a motion from myself, how would you like me to verbalize that for your purposes? That so I can try. Why don't I stab first and then we'll see what happens. So that staff be directed to amend the language with regards to 23A notice of motion to add the sentence at the conclusion of the meeting to add or 5 business days prior to the next scheduled council meeting. And that would provide that and then direct staff to approve the procedural bylaw with the amendment. Those would be 2 recommendations I think that could work. Councilor Byrne, question with regards to I don't have it seconded yet, so that motion is just speculative right now. So go ahead, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, so just so I'm clear, we're going to discuss this one adjustment and then there's still room for other talk.
There definitely can be. So why don't we separate? I didn't realize there was other questions about the procedural bylaw. So let's just park that. There's no seconding of the motion right now, but we know where we're kind of going to go in that regard. I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor and then we'll come back to motions at a later date in the discussion.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think I just try to simplify it, to be honest with you, and say she'll provide the motion by the deadline due or whatever however you phrase it. Because whether you make it 5 days or whatever, like you want it consistent with all your deadlines, right? Like you don't want to have to go back through this and if you ever change that deadline. So whatever that set deadline is for the next council meeting, whatever that terminology is.
Through Mayor Graham to yourself and the rest of council, under 13A, if we mirror that language there, that it's not later than 12 p.m. 5 business days prior to the council meeting, that will mirror the same language and we will, perfect. Okay, perfect. And then it aligns with the other direction in your timelines in the procedural bylaw. Good.
Isn't clouded by my wordsmithing. So that's great. Thank you for that suggestion. Councilor Byrne had a question.
Through the chair back to the clerk, are we legally responsible to add the land acknowledgement to every meeting technically? I know I've got lots of feedback over the last several years that maybe a lot of people have issues with that, or how does that regulate it?
Through you, Mayor Graham to Councillor Byrne, it isn't legal, it is a respect. So it is about respecting and acknowledging the land and respecting and showing our gratitude for First Nations. That is why we do it.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Follow-up question, Councilor Byrne.
So on that note, is that a direction of council that we keep doing that and we don't add anything else about all these settlers that came and carved this community out of the wilderness? I just kind of have issues with it.
Ms. Page.
Through Mayor Graham, I'm going to direct this back to yourself and the rest of council to make that decision.
So as the chair, I have certain discretions, not very much, but in the way of prescribed responsibility. So it's, when it comes to running the meeting and the components of the meeting, I do have that autonomy to instill the land acknowledgement. I spoke with Chief Carr from Hiawatha specifically and personally about, the merits behind it and the intentions with it, to ensure that it was appropriate. And she was very appreciative. And so based on that conversation with her directly, it was my discretion to create the land acknowledgement that I vetted with her. So that is within my powers of discretion. So that is what, in essence, my choice and under my purview, and that's why it's there. So if you'd like to make a vote to remove it, then you could probably have I am bound by council's votes as well. So there could be a vote to remove the land acknowledgement altogether, but That is at council's discretion, but I certainly have had nothing but positive feedback on the land acknowledgement from anyone, any member of the community ever. So I think it's an important step to move forward with doing business in the modern age, and that's why it's there. But this is acknowledging it in the procedural bylaw is again up to council's purview.
Through you, Chair, just for the, it's wrong now. Okay, through you, Chair, I would not be in support of removing the land acknowledgement. I think that it's important that we have this available, that we have this in and recognize the people in our community. If you wanted to add to it, that would be something else to consider, but to remove it, I'm strongly and vehemently opposed to it.
Thank you, Councilor Nash. Other questions, members of council? Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I just did notice that within your procedural bylaws, there is a definition section, so it might be easier just to define your due date rather than have it mirrored in multiple places. Just consideration there.
We are solving this problem a million different ways, but I think we defer to the clerk. I think the council's intention's pretty clear. We would like not a specific one point in time reference to this. I think making it consistent throughout the document, as was previously discussed, makes sense. Just to use that reference to no, meeting the deadline for posting. I think that's as simple as possible, but we will ask the clerk to review the deadline definitions as well. And maybe there's an additional thing that could be added to that to make it all seamless and really tied together nicely. Okay, seeing no other questions, I will look for a mover and a seconder with regards, sorry, are you looking for, no, okay, so. As amended, correct. So that council adopt bylaw number 2026-09 being a bylaw to govern the calling, place and proceedings of meetings, excuse me, as amended, correct? Perfect, excellent. Look for a mover and a seconder for that. Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councilor Natchez, all in favor. That is approval. Next item is 9.4 council remuneration bylaws. Ms. Pate.
Welcome back. Before council is Corporate Services Report 2025-06, Council Remuneration Bylaw. And it is a requirement that during the term of council that your remuneration and your expenses are reviewed. So before council, you will see there is a proposed breakout and an increase, a potential increase to your conferences. The last time this was established was in 2015, and that was at $5,000. So staff thinks to have a better reflection of what's happening in today's day, it should be increased to $8,000 as well. The only other addition that you will see here is we're doing some housekeeping and we're removing bylaw 2002-46, which allowed for the 1/3 exemption. And then in 2017, the minister chose to remove that. And then effective 2019, the 1/3 is no longer exempt. So before you is your remuneration bylaw.
And Ms. Pope, just a question. I think it helps for clarity. So because of the increasing cost of the conferences, again, it's up to council's purview to, whether they attend or not, whether they take value or, sometimes we're doing delegations there too. So you kind of got to go to be a part of that. When that money isn't spent, it's not like it's just distributed to counselors, but it flows back. Can you kind of give some clarity on, okay, so we have to increase the upset limit if you want to go. And it's tradition for council to allow, especially for the next council, which will be under that bylaw, to be eligible to go to those conferences. But when that money is not spent, can you maybe provide some clarity as to where it flows and how it gets accumulated back against the levy?
Thank you. Through you to all of council. Historically, if you look at the email or the budgets over the last number of years, we have had a rollover amount in each of your budgets to try to keep the expenses for the next year down. So sometimes it's allocated that way. If it's actually left at the end of the year and unspent, it does go into general, anything above and beyond that, because not everybody's in the exact same boat. But that's what happens. And then we use that surplus annually every year. We budget for that so that we're not charging the property taxpayer again for the same service that was available the previous year. So whether or not you take it, it does go back into general reserve. We do allocate a little bit through the actual budget annually as well to keep the interest down or the increase down. But does that answer the question?
I guess my question is too, I think I've heard this come up in other councils. I don't think I've heard of it coming up at our township before in the previous term or this term. But it, when we talk about conferences, there's really kind of the core 4 or 5, depending on whether they're merged together or separately. Is there like, those are really the only ones that I can recall any one of our member of our council, but I have heard of other municipalities where there's been maybe more nuanced or different conferences where there's been requests to utilize or for the travel expenses and registration to be funded through the municipality. Is there that opportunity within our sort of bylaw to go beyond those 5 conferences? I mean, like, there are all kinds of conferences. I mean, I hear about new ones every time when you're at a conference. There's new ones that certain people are going to. I don't know if I'm for or against it, but I am curious if there are things that, beyond the, the Roma, the Good Roads and the AMO, et cetera, like if there are others that counselors or maybe new counselor are interested in, is that something that they can, how would the process even be for consideration in that, if that's something we should consider with regards to our bylaw?
Through you, Mayor, to all of council. We discuss it every year during the budget process, and usually the clerk's department will bring forward any of the ones that are eligible or that are out there. So that's a discussion during budget every year. But in addition to that, we have had members of council in the past that have chosen not to go to certain conferences, but then they want to use their funds because that was part of being able to allocate those funds where they saw fit in order to learn. And so they could take online webinars, especially in the first year as well. So we have had flexibility for that to happen, not above the 5,000 limit that used to be there, but you did have flexibility and continue to have flexibility, but the clerk usually brings forward the exact conferences that are normally attended.
Yes, so it sounds like it is a possibility as long as like you're within your, your allocated expenses. But I guess maybe some clarity, maybe, I'm not sure if it's for Yvette or Cindy, what would be the process for a member of council to ask if this was a viable opportunity, if they believe they have, they haven't gone to other conferences, but they found something that's of interest? How would they go about asking, or is that a council decision, or is that how would they go about asking for that to be considered as an eligible expense?
That's approved under the clerk's budget, which is under the corporate services. So between the clerk and the CAO, they would give permission, but they can elaborate.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to yourself and the rest of council, depending on what the conference is, I think that's a good answer. We could look at it. We've never ever regulated them, and that's why we've allowed that, because to your point, it might be different types of learning or different things that are interest you. And that's why it does say conventions, conferences, workshops, or seminar registrations. And it's not that we say it has to be OBER, it has to be AIM, or it has to be OEMC. We add those 4 to our annual schedule, just so council's aware of those, because those are generally the top 4. But no, it does not mean you have to. The bylaw does not specify those. It can be any of those things: conventions, conferences, workshops, or seminars within the allotted amount.
Yeah, thanks for that. I thought there was flexibility, but it's just never occurred. And I know that when you hear someone else talking about using municipal, like their expenses to go to a conference, I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't feel right. So, and again, it's just my opinion, and certain people could have an opinion that, yeah, it's valid or not, but I didn't know if there was an oversight process when it's beyond the, like I said, the core 4 or 5 conferences that we have. But it sounds as though if there is anyone that finds something that's of interest and they have an allocation, they could just send an email to yourself and the CAO and have it discussed and handled internally, and there's no issues with that. Did you want to say something?
Just one point of clarification on the mileage, because council members, when they're elected, that when they travel within our municipal boundary, that is a personal expense, and it's only when they travel outside. So if there was a course that was taken and it was local and not outside of our boundary, we wouldn't necessarily reimburse for mileage, but that would be really it.
Sorry about that, Council. I'm just curious about how it works. Questions with regards to the bylaw? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Kimberly, I was wondering if there's a possibility for the town or the council to consider item 5 on page 87 refers to the automatic increases in salaries on the January of every year compared to the CPI numbers that are pushed out. And I realize bringing up a point of maybe freezing that right now seems pretty lame, because I'm in my last year of a term. But with the conditions out there in the real world, I think a lot of people are struggling, and they don't see automatic increases every year the way government bureaucracy does. And I just think that would it be appropriate? And the other reality is, at the end of the day, if the next council comes in, they have the option to change it back if they wanted to. I just think that we could kind of be leading by example by putting a freeze in. I know it's simpler to do it this way. That might have been part of the reason for doing it. I don't know. I'm just looking at that as a possibility.
Ms. Pope?
This bylaw is as per council's direction, not for staff to identify what we are to do or not do. That's why it's before you before the next election occurs. And so that those members are aware of what's available to them over their next term. So it's not really within the staff purview. That's a discussion amongst council.
Thanks, Ms. Pope. So if there were, this is again for council's feedback and consideration and ultimately direction. So that can be an easily a discussed component if so choose. Other questions? Councilor Edge.
To you, Mr. Mayor, the Pope here, clerk here.
Not quite the Pope, but
No.
Ms. Pope. That's right.
Oh,
She holds a lot of power.
you have the power. Anyhow, I read in here where it says that they pay for manual life group benefit for some people. Evidently, some of us old boys don't qualify for that. So in the real world, if you were starting with a company and you weren't on full time, you would get reimbursed some of that cost for what it would cost for that.
Speak to that.
Sure. Through Councillor Edgerton to all of council, Manulife benefits are provided as per what's in the industry and industry standard. If council is requesting that we go out and we look for above industry standard for some, it's because it's the same legislative periods of time and age for staff and council. So council's not being treated unfairly. That's not what it's intended to be. But if you wanted us to go out and seek if there was insurance above that age, we could look into that. But that hasn't been the past practice for this municipality. And we just haven't been directed to look for that under our Manulife plan.
Follow up, or that's okay? That's a worthwhile discussion. Okay. Other questions? Being none? Okay, any questions or anyone want to make a motion with regards to the procedural bylaw? I know Councilor Byrne, you brought up something. I think the only issue I have, and I understand the point, but I just worry that it's kind of an empty tokenism gesture. I mean, the issue is by putting a halt to it, you're just passing down the line a bigger adjustment when you do these remuneration revisitations. Like if you don't continue with a nominal cost of living increase, what you have is when you do the compensation reviews, you've fallen out of step with everyone else who has done those interviews. And then it's just going to be a pass down and a bigger adjustment down the line. I think we're fairly compensated. I voted against the significant raise that was being proposed last term at council for all of us. So I think that, I agree that there's a merit to being responsible, but I think there's a significant commitment in doing this work, and to just kind of disrupt a gradual flow that seemingly keep us in pretty fair step from a compensation wise. I just hate having to, make those larger adjustments and put that pressure on future councils rather than having simply cost of living that's consistent with staff. But again, that's just my position, but I understand the merits to it, but we're talking about very low. I mean, if you apply cost of living at 2% for a total of, we're talking in the single thousands of dollars, not hundreds of dollars. So anyways, that's just my position, but the recommendation is that we, being a bylaw to set the remuneration, that we approve the bylaw and with regards to the report. Anyone want to make a motion? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Nasha. All in favor? That is approved. Good discussion, everybody. 9.5 corporate services, the 175th Millbrook Fair. It is coming up, and we will hear more about it from Ms. Page.
Thank you, Mayor Graham, to yourself and the rest of council. This is very exciting. 175 years. I think we decided it's older than Canada. Isn't that what we decided? Yeah, very, very exciting. So before council for your consideration, annually they come and ask us to designate their event as community festival and municipally significant event. So your recommendations are before you. The council designate the 175th Millbrook Fair is the community festival and municipal significant event, and that the Millbrook Agricultural Society is responsible for the policing costs during the hours of operation, and that the community festival designation be conditional upon the minimum police presence as outlined below. If any questions, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, and just so council's aware, given the fact that this is a significant anniversary, I just wanted to put you on notice now that there's probably an expectation to try to, especially on the Thursday, myself and a number of members of the senior staff met with the members of the fair board and talked about how we can support the fair with this significant anniversary. And we're working together on, we want to support their plans, not come with our own, but there's lots of good discussion taking place and they're coming back to us probably this month to sort of move those conversations further along and see how we can sort of help make the fair as great as it can be for this anniversary. So I would just sort of keep those dates in mind. And if you're able to, I mean, obviously there's lots that can happen between now and then, but try to make yourselves available, especially for the Thursday for the grand opening portion. I know we haven't all been able to attend in the past, but given the 175th anniversary, I think there have been talks about including council a bit more in the grand opening side of things. So obviously we want to be available to support the board doing that. So there's more on that to come as we continue to meet with the board, but exciting that the fair and this anniversary is just around the corner. Any questions with regards to the report? If not, the recommendations are before us. I'm not going to read all three. It's very straightforward. Take a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burns, second by Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? Those are approved. Report and capital status, Ms. Hurley.
Thank you, Mayor, to council. The report capital status is before you today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Hurley? Councillor Burns.
Through the chair on page 101, the center of your report, where are we now with planning for what's going on at 3 and 5 Center Street?
Through you, Council Byrne and council. Where we are right at this moment is we are just finalizing to list that property. If you mentioned last month, I mentioned to you that we needed to finalize the easement. That was a request from council. So that has now been finalized. We do have the language from legal counsel. We have met with our realtor. So we will be just finalizing that and listing it hopefully within the next few weeks, actually.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Other questions with regards to the report and capital project status? Councillor Natchoff.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is, I guess, Mr. Allison isn't here. It would be a question, but you can ask it, answer it. It's a simple one. I did bring up a couple of meetings before about trying to get some signage on place for the old hockey rink, just so that any people in the community can connect with us. I know the ground's still frozen and all of that stuff. Just to make sure that it is on the agenda to have it up sooner than later. We're seeing more and more people coming to the area, and I've just had people asking if there's anywhere to contact to get more information. Thanks.
Ms. Hurley.
Thank you. Right now, we're working on actually doing just that. We're actually getting printouts of the design and the proposed design for the downtown park. We have reached out to Orca to ask them if we could actually utilize their existing signage and put some new signage up there and contact. We also have an added section on our website for both the downtown park and the CMCC lands. So again, we are working with landscape planning to finalize those plans to make them nice, bright and colorful. Talk about the phasing and also talk about the contact information. But all of that should be up very shortly. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Councillor Burns.
Through the chair to Mr. Hancock, I'm just curious where we're at. The other year we did actual pavement on Hayes Line and Land Line. And I just wonder where we are in that process of what's going to be done to repair or fix whatever we have going on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Councillor Byrne. First of all, just as a comment, we have not paid any funds towards that project yet. The contractor is still responsible for the, I guess, the deficiencies on the job. We've recently been contacted by their legal department requesting partial payment. We're just under discussions on that. And we are looking to have the deficiencies corrected as soon as possible in May of this year.
Thanks, Wayne. Seeing no other questions, look for a motion to receive the CAO report and capital status. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. Council committee verbal reports. Any committee reports? I have a couple. With the library had a special finance committee meeting to further clarify and adjust our submission for the DC bylaws that Ms. Pope is working on. And again, sort of basing it off what council saw, where we have, you know, a formula and approach to actually utilizing DCs rather than just accumulating it and not getting it out to utilization in the various different projects. So we're going to have another conversation about some of those projects and move forward with that as at the board, probably starting tomorrow night when we meet next. I wasn't able to meet with the police board last time, but we are meeting again next Tuesday, or sorry, tomorrow again. So I'll have another update with regards to that. Any other verbal reports? Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, we did have a meeting with the BIA last week, and we have kind of confirmed all of our scheduled events that we're planning for this year. So I believe Ms. Hyatt will be bringing forward that list at our next meeting. So we have, you know, Ladies' Night, Christmas in the Village, Spook On, Easter egg hunt, and probably missing one in there somewhere, but the Fall Festival, they'll all come forward with set dates so we can actually start providing that to everybody.
And just before I forget, and you reminded me that I just want to, again, I think we thanked the previous members of the medical board at the last meeting, but myself and Deputy Mayor Huntley have met and has formed a new board with certain members of staffs, and we've been communicating with the tenants there to make sure there's a continuation of the service delivery. So we're trying to work out a meeting, but as you can imagine, the tenants there are pretty busy with their schedules and providing the services to the community that they need. So that might be a little difficult, but we have been engaged with them and we're continuing on with finalizing the transfer of all the various service providers and contacts, but we want to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. And to date, we've been pretty good. So we'll probably have a meeting coming up again on that regard shortly. So that's the end of my committee updates. Can I get a motion to receive those verbal updates? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. There is no general business. There is no correspondence for information. There is no correspondence for action. Okay, is it the first one? No.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, all right. So bear with me. There's about a whole page of, let's see, I'm gonna just take a drink. Okay. That bylaw number 2026-09 being a bylaw to govern the calling, place, and proceedings of the meetings, and bylaw number 2026-10 being as amended is the first part?
Yes.
I'll start again. That bylaw number 2026-09 being a bylaw to govern the calling, place, and proceedings of meetings as amended, and bylaw number 2026-10 being a bylaw to repeal and replace sections of the Village of Millbrook bylaw number 85-31 designating 8 King Street West in the Township of Catamonigan, formerly the Village of Millbrook, as meaning of cultural heritage value or interest under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and bylaw number 2026-11 being a bylaw to repeal and replace sections of the Village of Millbrook bylaw number 85-31 designated 11 King Street West to the Township of Catamonigan, formerly the Village of Millbrook, and as being of cultural heritage value or interest under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and bylaw 2026-12 being a bylaw to repeal and replace sections of the Village of Millbrook bylaw number 85-31 designating 13 Ann Street in the Township of Catamonigan, formerly the Village of Millbrook, as being of cultural heritage value or interest under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and bylaw number 2026-13 being a bylaw to set the remuneration and expenses for members of council or of a local board, and bylaw number 2026-14 being a bylaw to execute the Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement TPA on the Municipal Housing Infrastructure Program, Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund Intake 2, top up between His Majesty the King and as represented by the Minister of Infrastructure and the Corporation of the Township of Catamonigan for access to funding for bylaw number 2026-15 being a bylaw to execute the Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement TPA on the Municipal Housing Infrastructure Program, Health and Safety Water Systems between His Majesty the King as represented by the Minister of Infrastructure and the Corporation of the Township of Catamonigan for access to funding be read a first, second, third time and passed this 16th day of March, signed by the Mayor and the Clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto. Can I get a move for those bylaws? Moved by Councillor Edgerton, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? Those are approved. There is no unfinished business. We do have a notice of motion. And so just there was a bit of confusion at the end of the last meeting. So what I would like to do, if possible, to consider the notice of motion at this meeting is we would need unanimous support of council to suspend the procedural rules so that we could have consideration of the notice of motion today. So I'm going to start by asking for that consideration. So we need a vote. So I need a mover and a seconder for that recommendation and then a vote. Moved by Councilor Barron, second by Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is unanimous support so that we can do it. So with that, the notice of motion is before us. Councilor Barron, would you like to speak to it? Or like I said, we can consider it now that we've suspended the rules, but I'll turn it over to you.
Through the chair, so I'm not sure, am I supposed to read? Okay. I would like to make a motion to look at the using of the sale of the Emsdale property to purchase a piece of equipment to maintain the road allowances throughout the township, which I consider critical responsibility of the township, basically a safety and to help maintain the road surfaces that we've been.
Okay, we get a seconder for that motion, moved by Councilor Edgerton, and then discussion with regards to the motion. Any questions or comments with regards to the motion? So, Councilor Natchoff? Yep.
I'm flashing here. Okay, through you, Chair. What is the piece of equipment that you were discussing? You didn't list specifically what it was.
Mr. Hancock, do you maybe want to answer that just so for clarity's purposes and takes pressure off? Councilor Burns got the hard part done to get the motion on the floor, so maybe Mr. Hancock can speak to that because it was identified in the capital budget, just not for procurement this year.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to council. The identification in the budget was a roadside mower. It's actually, we've used different terminology of it. The one, I think, name that's been used frequently has been the Mantis. It's relatively new to North America or to Canada anyhow. There is several different types of mowers available and there is several different types of attachments. So it is identified and I think presently we have 200,000, I believe, set aside in the budget for that equipment.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's scheduled for in the capital plan, I want to say 2028, maybe 2029. Is that correct? And the total cost was initially 400,000, but I think that's not the right number. Can you just clarify maybe both of those data points or maybe between staff they can?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's quite a variation in numbers there. I mean, depending on the type and size of the piece of equipment. So it has ranges. We had originally, I think, an estimated cost of just over 400, and I think it ranges up to 600,000 now. And it's dependent on what you're calling for and what type of piece of equipment you're looking for.
Ms. Hurley?
Through you, council, just to clarify, any type of equipment based on our purchasing policy would have to follow that policy, meaning that it's not about the type, it would be an RFP that would have to be carried out. There are multiple pieces of equipment out there that can carry out the same purpose. The question is which one, if that's the direction that council wishes to go.
Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair. I struggle with this one as I wasn't too keen on this being on the new capital purchases in the first place because the services that we are purchasing to perform this task, I mean, aren't that significant compared to a $600,000 piece of equipment. So to me, the ROI on this still doesn't make sense. So rushing into this again doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm not supporting this, and I will let the budget process take its budget process as it is, even though it's not a piece that I'm in favor of, but actually, spending this Elmdale property money on that now, and definitely.
Yeah, I think it's important to consideration in the notice of motion. What's being asked for is an investigation to look at this machinery. So by no means does the motion bind council to the eventual purpose. I think where I struggle is a bit separate, maybe somewhat related to the deputy mayor, is that 400,000 represents almost 3.75% of the tax levy that we oversee in a given year. And we don't make frivolous decisions about, especially pieces of equipment that we haven't had full reports on just yet. So to me, this is a budget level discussion. I'm not sure if or what the timeline would be to come back with a report. Like, to me, we're already, just by the date and time of this term of council almost being over and lame duck around the corner. Like, I don't even know about the feasibility of vetting the various alternative technologies, doing an RFP. You're not, the likelihood that we'll be receiving a piece of equipment anytime in this calendar year is very slim in my perspective, not to say that it couldn't happen if all the stars align. But I guess and if it's not gonna come this year and be in practice, to me, it's a budget decision for the next term of council. And so maybe Wayne could provide any clarity or perspective on any of those points and maybe the timeline specifically, because I'm not against looking into it. To me, again, it's just whether or not this council is probably not gonna have the time or the legal space to theoretically make a purchase of that significance because of how, or whether they should or they shouldn't, they might be able to, but it's quite frowned upon when it comes to lame duck components of fiscal nature, especially of that amount compared to the budget. So maybe you can look to you to put you on the spot to maybe speak to those concerns.
Mr. Mayor, I think, first of all, I agree this is it's an expensive piece of equipment. We've looked at some variations in it. I think at one point in time, council was looking for a report on it to sort of give them an idea of what's available in the marketplace, what are the values of the different pieces of equipment. We do have presently we do some roadside. We have an attachment on our rubber tired excavator that we use. It's called the Slasher. Everyone's a little bit familiar with it. We do some roadside mowing that is done by a side mower that is a rental piece of equipment. We do also some roadside spraying. That's become one of the things that we find is pretty proactive against environmentally invasive species, things of that nature. My suggestion on this, and I mean, looking at it, I would say that we'd be better to prepare a report and have it referred to a budget deliberation. I think it's the best way to handle it. That way you're looking at it from the point of view that staff are providing you with the different alternatives and get direction from council on where to go with the purchase. That would be my recommendation.
Well, I think it's important because it's not inconsistent with the motion to do what that is. The motion isn't inconsistent with what you're saying. It's just, I think it's important that we understand what the expectation deliverables are, because my only issue with some of the language in doing that report for the next budget is that you need to have a more comprehensive, we're not just vetting the pieces of equipment, but it's got to be in comparison to the rental approach that we're taking, because there are a lot of implications on the operational expense line for bringing on additional equipment like this, especially in a unionized environment that we have with the public works staff. So as long as the report, whether it comes back before the budget time or in line with the budget time, that's great. But I'm more concerned about it encompassing a total review of this equipment and this service level that we're providing. And maybe in addition, having a capital plan to say, this is where we're working on the roadside mowing, just like we do for whether it's paving or other surface treatment. We should have a plan to show when this is going in place, because there's, like you said, there's environmental restrictions on when we can even do this various work. So I think it would be helpful to understand the plan. And then I think an extension of that report would be, well, if we own a machine, how much more or less could we do? Because again, if we add equipment to the fleet, you then have to start saving for the replacement of that equipment to the fleet, and 400,000 is not nothing when it comes to, fleet management. So I don't know, that's sort of my concerns about the motion as it's worded, but I think there's a way to have this all sort of work together to get a report for consideration at the next budget meeting, understanding the holistic overview that has to occur with, I think, for any council to review and make decisions of this size and scope, especially a smaller rural township like ours. You really need a comprehensive report on the whole picture, what we've been doing now and what we can accomplish given that way and what the costs are. And then what we could alternatively do should we, a full fiscal picture of owning the machine, and obviously the costs associated with that process as well. So that's what I'm looking for in a report. I just don't think you can really do that. I don't think there's any way of doing that and having a machine in 2026. And then in my point, if in Wayne's, not verbally, but saying, no, he doesn't believe that's possible either. So with that regard, I think my friendly amendment to the motion would be language to the effect that a fulsome report surrounding the purchase or potential purchase of this equipment, be brought forward to the next council at the 2027 budget deliberations that explores the full, compass of the implications of this machine and the service offering that we could provide. So it's not exactly what Councilor Brand asked, but it kind of gets us there, and it gets us there at the time where I think is the appropriate time to make those fiscal decisions. And you don't necessarily have to dovetail it. I think that you know, with regards to the Elmdale property, I mean, that money can flow in and out with regards to the budget. And if that council chooses to use it, by all means, that can be a part of the suggestion in the report, that it is an opportunity to use, and that should be, and that's consistent with what Councillor Burns asking for. So there's a couple friendly amendments in there, Councillor Burns. Does that make sense to you? Is that, can we get to a motion that kind of works for all parties to pursuing that? It just might not be, you know, there's no clear timeline on the intention in the motion, but that gets it on the horizon, and there's full expectation that the next council will have a fulsome report to review at that budget meeting, and that money is not going to be, there's no intentions to allocate it anywhere in the time being. Does that make sense?
Through the chair, short answer, yes. My intention or the interest in doing this, we've known for decades that people that build roads, maintain roads, that if we don't keep the road allowance cleaned, that actually causes us grief for maintaining road surfaces. This was brought up years ago, and I knew that there was a piece of product that has not been sold, and I would think they probably want to sell it. So that was one of the reasons for bringing it up now. Whether that's the piece of equipment you choose, I don't care. It's not my decision. But I just know this is something that needs to be done, has been neglected to be done for a long, long time. And there's the safety aspect for line of sight. So yes, whatever has to happen to make this move forward is a positive.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. I do take a little bit of an issue with the insinuation that it hasn't been done. We've been running the machine to address this on a compartmental basis. I mean, it can't be done everywhere carte blanche, you know, at the drop of a hat. It's laborsome work that takes time to move equipment throughout the township. And this is a piece of equipment that a lot of municipalities at our size and scape don't have, right? Even the county of Peterborough doesn't have this sort of a piece of equipment. So I mean, it's all about, you know, we would love everything to be fully manicured and to the best extent possible, but we have to, you know, live within the fiscal parameters. But it sounds as though there's some there's some ability to accommodate. I guess I have to ask the seconder, Councillor Edgerton, are you okay with sort of that flexing that language around? The expectation is that staff come back to the 2027 budget deliberations with a fulsome report exploring the purchase and ongoing rental of this machinery, and a plan to address the roadside mowing responsibilities of the municipality in the future. That's as best as I can do. So that's a friendly amendment. So that's the new motion. So if you guys are okay with that, so I'm just going to confirm mover and a seconder, and then we can come back to the motion for discussion. So Councillor Byrne, you're okay to move that? And then Councillor Edgerton's okay to second. So we're all good. So then question with regards to the motion, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Chair, not quite, but maybe a bit of a nuance to it is, you know, at the county last time, or not last time, a couple months ago, maybe, we talked about the possibility of the county purchasing a wood chipper, you know, that could be shared amongst municipalities. Like maybe this is another sort of opportunity, because I mean, this is equipment that will be sitting idle for most of the time, and maybe it is something that the upper tier could purchase and lend out and kind of follow the same pattern as the wood chipper that they're investigating. Maybe that should be part of what included in that report as well.
I think the only hurdle with that is the time constraints on the utilization of the machine. All 8 municipalities are going to have to use it within a specified window. And you're all going to be climbing all over each other and hauling it all over the place. But maybe Mr. Hancock and Mr. Lee, do you want to speak to that element of it?
Through you, Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor's question. So most of the equipment that we do purchase, through our CAO group, we do vet that information and see if there's any sharing opportunities. To Mayor Graham's point, I think when it comes to this, there could be some limitations, but that doesn't mean that we still won't reach out when we purchase large pieces of equipment that are very costly. We always usually talk about that and see if there's any options for partnerships and sharing. So that's something that we vet on a regular basis, and we would do that for the report as well. Okay.
Okay, so then to appease the deputy mayor and sort of integrate that, there's an expectation that there can be conversations about shared equipment in regards to that report. Okay, very good. Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, just for a point of interest. So I don't think this type of machinery has to sit idle all that long. We rent equipment now to do a small job along the side of the roads, and we only rent it for a short period of time because of the cost of renting it. This is a piece of equipment that has more versatility than what we're doing right now.
Well, it could, we'll have to determine what piece of equipment that might be. So it has the potential for sure, and that will be vetted in the report, and that's the expectations. I think it's clear as mud for council and staff that you can look forward to that at the next budget discussion. Okay? So we have a motion on the floor, and all in favor? That is approved. Moving on, confirming bylaw. Is that bylaw number 2026-16 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held March 16th, 2026 be read a first, second, third time and passed this 16th day of March, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. Moved by Councillor Natchez, second by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. Lastly, a motion to adjourn today's meeting, moved by Councillor Edgerton, seconded by Councillor Natchez. All in favor? That is approved. There's a number of upcoming meetings and events. The Cabot Public Library Board meeting is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. The Municipal Revitalization and Heritage meeting is March 19th at 9 a.m. The Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting is Monday, March 23rd at 1 p.m. Milton Valley Trails meets on Monday, March 23rd at 4 p.m. Sustainability Advisory Committee meets on Thursday, March 26th at 1 p.m. Protecting Our Woodlands, a public information session draft woodland management bylaw is scheduled for April 1st, and that is not a joke, from 3 to 6 p.m. in the council chambers. The next regular scheduled council meeting is Tuesday, April 7th. And then we have our Earth Day celebration and Meet Your Municipal Team, which is a scheduled event for April 18th from 12 to 4 at the CMCC. And then the next subsequent regular council meeting is Monday, April 20th at 1 p.m. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in the township. Take care.